Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, far back to a place where stone walls rise like frozen waves above fields quilted in green where wood smoke curls lazily from chimney tops, and the clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoes faintly down winding dirt lanes. You're standing at the edge of a medieval manor, its hall looming ahead like the great rib cage of some ancient beast, and all around you is a world without electricity, internet, or even coffee to help you survive the morning. Honestly, you probably won't survive this not with the cold winter's hard bread and feudal duties waiting for you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's early morning somewhere around the year 1300. The sun is still low, spilling a soft gold over the manor grounds. The air smells faintly of damp earth and wood smoke, and the faint call of a rooster cuts through the chill. Your boots, crude leather stiff and worn, sink slightly into the muddy ruts of the track leading from the village toward the Lord's Hall. It's your first week as a resident here, though. Resident isn't quite the right word. You belong here, yes, but in the way a tree belongs in a forest. Not by choice, but because this is where you've been planted. The manor spreads out before you like a miniature kingdom, though the castle you might imagine from storybooks isn't quite here. Instead, there's the manor house itself, a large timber-framed hall, with wattle and daub walls, its upper floor jutting out slightly over the lower. Nearby, the chapel bell is already ringing, summoning the priest for his morning prayers. To one side, you catch sight of the dovecote, a round stone structure where plump pigeons flutter in and out, cooing softly. The fields are still damp from last night's dew, and in the distance you see the strips of cultivated land, narrow and carefully divided by low hedgerows and boundary markers. These aren't private gardens in the modern sense. Instead, they're part of the open field system, where each family tends scattered strips allocated to them by the manor's customs. Your own family's strips might be right here, but also 100 paces away, then another on the far side of the village. This way, everyone shares both the fertile and the less generous soils, fair in a way, but also endlessly inconvenient. A faint scent of baking bread drifts toward you from the direction of the village bakehouse. Not everyone can afford their own oven. In fact, most can't, so families bring their dough to the communal bakehouse, paying the Lord for the privilege of using it. You might have to bring your own batch later today, if you can spare the grain for it. Bread will be your main staple, sometimes flavored with peas or beans, to make the flour stretch. On special days, maybe you'll taste rye, or even a touch of wheat. But for now, it's just coarse barley bread, dense and a little sour. Ahead you pass the smithy, its open doorway glowing faintly with the light of the forge. The blacksmith looks up briefly, his hands blackened with soot, before returning to shaping an iron hinge with methodical hammer blows. Metal is precious here. Nails are reused until they're little more than bent scraps. Tools are mended endlessly, and every horseshoe is an investment in keeping the manor's transport and labor moving. You hear the low rumble of cattle being driven out toward the common pasture, their breath steaming in the cool air. A young boy barely tall enough to reach your shoulder trots alongside them, with a stick shooing them forward. He gives you a nod, nothing formal, just a shared recognition that everyone here is busy from dawn until dusk. Life is an endless loop of chores, seasons, and obligations. Speaking of obligations, as a tenant of the manor, You owe labor services to the Lord. On certain days you'll work his domain, the portion of land kept directly for his use. That might mean plowing with the heavy iron-tipped plow, sowing grain, reaping crops, or helping repair fences. On other days you'll tend your own strips. The line between your time and the Lord's is clear and not yours to negotiate. If you're a serf, you're bound to this land. You can't just pack up and leave without the Lord's permission. Today, though, your duties begin in the manor courtyard. You approach the great wooden gates, not towering fortress doors, but sturdy enough to keep livestock in, and the occasional wandering thief out. Inside, chickens scratch at the dirt. A few pigs snuffle noisily near the refuse heap, and a dog dozes in the sun, twitching in its sleep. Servants are already bustling about. One carries a basket of firewood toward the kitchens. Another is drawing water from the well. The air hums with quiet purpose. You pause, glancing toward the manor hall itself. It's not a private castle. It's more like the beating heart of the estate where the lord or his steward oversees everything. Inside, you'll find the great hall with its long wooden tables, the high table at the far end for the Lord's family, and the big open hearth in the center. The smoke rises through a hole in the roof, curling into the morning air. Meals here are simple but filling, thick pottages made from peas, beans, and oats, salted fish on fast days, and when the Lord is feeling generous meat from the manor's own herds. But for now, you're still outside, leaning on your hoe for a brief moment's rest before the day's work begins. Somewhere behind the manor, you hear the rhythmic whir of a quern stone as someone grinds grain into coarse meal. Nearby, the clatter of wooden pails tells you the dairymaids are already milking the cows. And beneath it all, there's the constant murmur of voices, the shared, unending conversation of life on a medieval manor. You take a slow breath, letting it fill your lungs. The air is cool, clean, and tinged with the earthy smell of soil and livestock. It's a world away from modern comforts, no cars, no supermarkets, no phones. And yet here, every face you see knows your name, your family, and your place in the delicate web that holds this little society together. You are a thread in a much larger tapestry, one woven not for individuals, but for the survival of the whole. And as the sun climbs a little higher, and the day truly begins, you step forward into the rhythm of the manor, the slow, steady pulse of life that has been beating here for centuries before you and will continue long after you're gone. You head toward the barns first. They stand just beyond the manor courtyard, long, low buildings of timber with thatched roofs, their wooden doors banded with iron. Inside, the scent is thick hay, warm animal breath, and the faint ammonia bite of manure. Sunlight filters through gaps in the walls, falling in thin golden lines across the straw-covered floor. You can hear the gentle shifting of the oxen as they chew cud tails, swishing slowly, their huge bodies steaming faintly in the cool air. These are the muscle of the manor. Without them, the heavy plow would never cut the stubborn soil. Horses might seem faster, but for deep, heavy earth oxen are the dependable, steady workers. You pass by a stack of rough-hewn plow parts, spare yokes, and a few long wooden poles that will be used to repair fences in the fields. A young man, probably no older than 18, is sharpening a blade on a whetstone, his movements slow and practiced. He nods at you, but doesn't pause. Tools are everything here, and keeping them sharp can mean the difference between finishing the plowing before rain or losing days of work. Outside, you make your way to the edge of the domain fields. Here, the ground stretches wide and open, split into long strips, each bordered by grassy ridges. You can see other villagers already at work, bent over hoes, hacking at stubborn weeds, or guiding plows pulled by teams of oxen. The air is filled with the rhythmic scrape of iron against soil, the murmur of voices, and the occasional sharp call to an animal that's decided to wander off the straight line. As you work your own stretch of earth, you can feel the muscles in your arms and back waking with each stroke. The soil is cool, crumbly, and smells faintly sweet. Last night's dew still lingers. Every so often you pause to straighten your spine and glance toward the horizon. There's no clock to measure your day. The sun is the only guide. Morning work will carry on until the bell in the chapel calls everyone to the midday meal. You notice how everyone here moves almost in harmony. No one is rushing, exactly rushing wastes strength, but there's no idleness either. The work is steady, continuous, and it belongs to the rhythm of the seasons. In spring, plowing and sowing. In summer, weeding and repairing fences. Autumn is for reaping and storing, winter for mending tools and tending livestock. The cycle doesn't stop, and neither do you. At the far edge of the field, you see the reeve making his rounds. The reeve is a fellow villager, but he's been chosen or maybe pressured into keeping order and making sure everyone meets their obligations to the Lord. He carries a stout staff and keeps a keen eye on the workers. If someone is shirking their duties or cutting corners, he'll know. And word will reach the steward soon enough. You keep your head down and your hands moving. The sun climbs higher. You wipe sweat from your brow with the back of your sleeve. Your stomach rumbles faintly, but you keep going until you hear the distant, familiar toll of the chapel bell. It's not just a call to prayer, it's the signal that the morning's first stretch of work is over. Everyone begins to drift toward the village green, where you'll share the midday meal. The green is a wide, uneven patch of grass at the village's heart. Children chase each other between the feet of adults. A few dogs weave hopefully among the crowd tails wagging. You join your neighbors settling on the grass, or a convenient log. Someone passes you a chunk of coarse bread and a small wedge of cheese, nothing fancy, but enough to steady your hunger. Others sip from wooden cups of ale, weak but nourishing, brewed from barley, and a bit of whatever else the brewer had on hand. Conversation hums quietly around you. Most talk is of the fields, how the barley is coming along, whether the beans will take when the next communal plowing day is set. There's news of a traveling peddler spotted a few miles away, carrying bolts of cloth, and perhaps some rare spices. Such visits are rare and stir a kind of gentle excitement. Someone wonders aloud if the peddler will make it here before the week is out. Once the meal is done, people stretch dust off their tunics and begin to drift back toward their tasks. You linger a moment, watching the movement of the village, the weaver heading back to her loom, the cooper rolling a half-finished barrel toward his workshop, the shepherd whistling for his dogs before heading out to the pasture. Everyone has their part to play. You decide to visit the edge of the woodland before returning to the manor's fields. The woodland is carefully managed. It belongs to the Lord, but villagers are allowed certain rights to gather firewood, graze pigs on fallen acorns, or collect nuts and berries in season. The air here is cooler, the shade dappled with shifting sunlight. You hear the call of a woodpecker somewhere high above, and the faint rustle of a rabbit darting into the underbrush. You pick up a few fallen branches, dry ones that will catch quickly in the hearth, and tie them into a bundle with a length of twine. Firewood is precious. A cold winter without enough stored fuel can be dangerous. You've heard stories of families huddling together in a single room, keeping a small fire going day and night just to survive the frost. On your way back, you pass the manor's fish pond, a shallow man-made pool where carp ripple lazily beneath the surface. These fish aren't just for show, they're a valuable source of food, especially during Lent or other fast days when meat is forbidden. The steward keeps a careful count, making sure no one takes more than their share. By the time you return to the fields, the afternoon work is already in motion. You fall back into the rhythm hoe, turn, clear, repeat. Your hands grow dusty, the sun warms your shoulders, and the hours slide by without much notice. It's work that leaves your mind free to wander about the harvest, to come about the stories your grandmother used to tell of saints and kings, about the little mysteries of life that will probably never be answered. Eventually, the angle of the sunlight begins to shift, lengthening shadows across the furrows. The bell will ring again soon for the evening meal. You straighten, stretch your back, and take in the sight of the manor. Once more the hall's sturdy frame against the sky, the smoke rising from a dozen chimneys. The sense that though the world is wide and unknown, on the hedgerows, everything you truly depend on is right here. The evening bell calls you back toward the village, its deep voice carrying over the fields and hedgerows. It isn't loud like a cathedral's grand chimes, but it's enough a familiar sound that threads its way through the fabric of daily life, marking the pauses in work and the turn of the day. You sling your hoe over your shoulder and join the slow trickle of people heading toward the manor courtyard. Some carry tools, others have baskets with herbs, onions, or eggs collected on the walk back. The children dart in and out of the moving crowd like quick minnows, their laughter weaving into the hum of low conversation. The manor kitchen is already busy. Through the wide open doorway, you catch the glow of the hearth fire. It's a broad, open stone hearth, big enough for several cauldrons to hang from blackened iron hooks. The smell is rich and savory, a thick pottage bubbling away the scent of leeks, barley, and perhaps a bone or two for flavor. A kitchen maid leans over the pot, stirring slowly with a long wooden spoon, her face lit by the firelight. Beside her, another kneads dough on a heavy table dusted with flour, her movements quick and certain. You take your place in the line of villagers who eat in the hall. The manor hall is both impressive and practical, a high-roofed space with timber beams darkened by years of smoke rushes strewn across the floor to keep the dirt underfoot less noticeable, and a long trestle table that can seat most of the community during meals. At the far end, on a raised dais, sits the Lord's table where he and his family take their supper. Tonight, the Lord himself is absent away visiting another manor, so his steward presides in his place, a man whose eyes seem to notice everything without effort. You settle onto the bench with your bowl and spoon. The pottage is thick and hot, filling the air with steam. You tear a piece of bread from the loaf passed down the table, dipping it into the stew before biting. The bread is coarse, the crust hard from the communal oven, but it softens quickly in the warm broth. Conversation here is quieter than at midday. People are tired from the day's work, and the focus is on filling empty stomachs. The flicker of the firelight dances on the walls, catching in the eyes of your neighbors. Across from you, an old man with a weather-lined face slowly chews each bite as if weighing it. To your left, a young woman with a scarf tied over her hair listens intently to a story told by her companion, something about a fox stealing into the chicken yard last night. Every now and then a burst of low laughter ripples through the table. When the meal ends, the hall doesn't empty immediately. This is the day's one moment to linger. Some men stay by the fire to talk about tomorrow's work. A few women gather near the far wall, sharing bits of sewing by candlelight. Children curl up beside their parents or sneak extra crusts from the breadbasket. The steward remains at the high table, speaking quietly with the reeve about the condition of the Lord's fields. You catch a few phrases rain before the week's end. Ox team needs a new yoke. The lower meadow's drainage still bad. Eventually, you step outside into the cool air. The sky is deepening toward twilight, the last light clinging stubbornly to the horizon. You take the path toward your own dwelling, a simple timber-framed cottage with walls of wattle and daub, its roof thick with thatch. Smoke curls from the small hole above your hearth, carrying the scent of your own fire. The door creaks faintly as you push it open. Inside the single room is dim lit by the glow from the hearth. A wooden table stands near the center. A few stools are scattered around it. Your bed is a simple frame filled with straw covered by a rough woolen blanket. In the corner, a small chest holds your few possessions: a change of linen, a knife, a couple of wooden bowls, and a pouch of coarse salt. Everything smells faintly of smoke and earth. You set down your tools and sit for a moment in the quiet. Outside, you can still hear the murmur of voices from the village street. Someone calling to a neighbor, a dog barking the creak of a cartwheel as it rolls slowly past. Soon, those sounds will fade into the stillness of night. Before sleep, you tend to the small chores that belong to every evening. You check the fire, adding a few sticks to keep it from dying completely during the night. You set out your boots to dry by the hearth. You run your fingers over the edge of your hoe, making a mental note to sharpen it tomorrow. Life here leaves no room for neglect. Every tool, every animal, every handful of grain matters. There's a certain comfort in this repetition. You know what tomorrow will bring: work in the fields, meals in the hall, evenings by the hearth. The days are shaped by the same pattern that has guided your parents and grandparents, and that will shape the lives of your children. The manor is more than a place. It's a rhythm, a living memory that holds everyone within it. As night deepens, you step outside one last time. The stars are scattered across the sky like spilled grain, cold and bright. The air smells faintly of damp grass and distant wood smoke. Somewhere out in the dark, an owl calls the sound low and deliberate. You stand there for a moment, breathing it in, letting the cool night settle into your bones. When you return inside, you lie down on your straw bed, pulling the blanket up against the chill. The fire's glow flickers on the wall, and the quiet settles around you like a second blanket. Tomorrow will come soon enough, and when it does, the manor will wake again to its endless cycle, the heartbeat of this small, self-contained world. Morning again. You wake to the faint gray light pressing at the edges of the shutter. The air inside your cottage is cool enough that you see your breath when you exhale. Somewhere in the dark corner, the last coals from last night's fire glow faintly, stubbornly clinging to life. You pull yourself from the warmth of your blanket and kneel to coax the fire back, feeding it a twist of dry straw, then a few thin sticks. It crackles hesitantly, then catches, throwing soft light across the packed earth floor. You slip into your tunic and hose the wool scratchy against your skin, but welcome in the chill. A wooden bowl of barley gruel waits from last night's preparation. Nothing fancy, just a thick paste warmed again over the fire. You eat slowly, watching the light strengthen outside. Beyond the shutter, the rooster crows, his voice echoing faintly across the village. The sound is your second alarm, though here no one would call it that. It's simply part of the world's natural clock. Outside, the village is waking. Smoke rises from scattered chimneys. Doors open with slow, deliberate creaks. You pass the neighbor's cottage and see a woman shaking out bedding, her breath curling in the morning air. A few steps further, a boy trots past with a basket of eggs, careful not to drop them. He grins at you as he goes, the sort of bright smile that belongs to someone who's not yet learned the full weight of manor life. The steward has assigned today as a day of Lord's work on the domain. That means no tending your own strips. Instead, you'll be in the fields that belong directly to the Lord. There's a shared understanding about these days. They're long, they're demanding, and they leave little energy for your own affairs. But no one questions them. This is the shape of the bargain that binds everyone here. You follow the slow stream of workers toward the domain's far meadow, where teams of oxen stand ready beside the heavy plows. The fields here are wide, the earth dark and rich, cut into long ribbons waiting to be turned. The plowmen walk beside their beasts, urging them forward with low, steady voices, while others, including you, follow behind to break up clods and clear stray stones from the furrows. The work is hard on your back, but there's a rhythm to it that carries you forward. Step, lift, toss. Step, lift, toss. By mid-morning, your hands are gritty, your boots damp with dew. You pause to straighten and glance around. The reeve moves between groups, his sharp gaze scanning the work. He exchanges a few words with the steward, who stands with arms folded, a roll of parchment in hand. They're taking note of who's present, who's working, and how the field progresses. It's not just about getting the job done, it's about keeping the ledger of obligation balanced. When the sun stands higher, a small cart arrives from the manor with midday provisions, rough loaves of bread, small wedges of cheese, and a skin of weak ale. The cart is left near the edge of the field, and workers drift over in twos and threes to collect their share. You find a patch of grass and sit eating slowly, watching the oxen chew their cud in the distance. Conversation is light. Everyone knows you'll be back to work soon. After the break, the pace shifts. The plowmen move faster now, anxious to finish their allotted strips before the day wanes. You can feel the fatigue in your shoulders and legs, but you press on. The soil here has been worked for generations, yet it still resists in places, as though reluctant to yield another year's harvest. Late in the afternoon, clouds gather in the west, a slow-moving bank of gray that promises rain by nightfall. The air grows heavier, cooler. You work harder now, trying to finish before the first drops fall. The reeve calls encouragement, his voice carrying over the clatter of tools and the low grunt of the oxen. When the last furrow is turned, a quiet satisfaction settles over the group. Tools are collected, plows wheeled to shelter oxen led back toward the barns. The steward makes a quick note on his parchment before tucking it into his belt. For today at least, the Lord's domain has been well tended. You return to the village with the others. The first light rain begins to fall as you reach the green pattering softly on thatched roofs and the leaves of the few small trees scattered about. Chickens hurry under cover. A dog shakes itself in the doorway of the bakehouse. The air smells faintly of wet earth and wood smoke. Inside the hall, the evening meal waits. Tonight's pottage is thicker than usual, flavored with onions and a handful of dried herbs from the manor's small kitchen garden. A fresh loaf of bread passes from hand to hand, the crust warm enough to steam faintly in the cool air. You eat with slow contentment, the fatigue in your limbs making the food taste even better. After supper, the mood is quieter than usual. The rain drums steadily on the roof. A few men gather near the hearth to mend harness straps. Women sew by the dim glow of rushlights. children doze against their mother's sides. The steward sits alone at the high table writing in the manor's accounts. The scratching of his quill is a small, steady sound against the rain's soft backdrop. When you step outside, the air is damp and cool. The village paths glisten faintly in the torchlight spilling from doorways. You walk home slowly, boots squelching in the mud, the sound almost comforting. Inside your cottage, you tend the fire change into dry hose and settle onto your bed with the satisfaction of a day's work done. The rain continues through the night, a soft, steady lullaby that wraps the manor in a blanket of sound. Beyond the walls of your cottage, the world might be vast and uncertain. But here in this small, self-sufficient place, life is clear in its shape, certain in its pattern, and as steady as the fall of rain on thatch. The rain passes in the night, leaving the air fresh and cool by dawn. When you push open the door of your cottage, the world feels newly washed. The sky is pale, streaked with thin clouds, and the roofs glisten faintly in the early light. The smell of wet earth rises from the ground, mingling with the faint tang of smoke from the first morning fires. Somewhere close by, a cockerel crows again, his call echoing off the timbered walls. Today, the manor's work turns inward. After days in the fields, there's repairing, mending, and tending to be done closer to home. You join a small group heading toward the barns, passing the village green, where children splash barefoot in the puddles left by the rain. Their laughter carries lightly on the air, mixing with the rhythmic clop of hooves as a cart trundles past its wheels, leaving deep marks in the softened earth. At the barn, the oxen are contentedly chewing hay steam curling from their nostrils in the cool air. A stable boy, barely taller than the beast's knees, works methodically, forking fresh straw into their stalls. You take up a mallet and a handful of nails to help repair a loose board on one wall. The wood is rough beneath your palms, still damp from the rain, and you can smell the sweet, sharp scent of the fresh straw as you work. Once the wall is secure, you make your way toward the tool shed. Inside, it's a jumble of plows, hoes, sickles, and spare harnesses, all leaning or hanging in a kind of organized chaos. The shed smells of oiled wood and iron with a faint undertone of damp soil carried in on boots. You find your own hoe, still dusty from the last few days' work, and set about sharpening it with a flat, smooth stone. Each scrape of metal on stone is slow and deliberate, almost meditative. Beyond the sheds, the manor's workyard hums with activity. The blacksmith's hammer rings out again, clear and steady, as he shapes a glowing strip of iron into a hinge. Nearby, the carpenter leans over a sturdy bench, shaving curls from a length of timber to fit it into a new plow frame. The wood shavings fall in tight spirals at his feet, pale against the dark, damp earth. You stop to watch for a moment, the scent of fresh cut oak drifting toward you. In the kitchen garden, a few women bend over the herb beds, their skirts brushing the damp soil. The garden is small but carefully tended, neat rows of sage, thyme, and parsley, their leaves still sparkling with drops from last night's rain. You offer to help gather a handful of leeks, their roots clinging stubbornly to the soil. Your fingers come away cool and gritty, the white stalks clean and fresh in your hand. By midday, the clouds have begun to thin, and the sun breaks through, warming the stones of the courtyard. You take your meal outside, a crust of bread, a sliver of cheese, and a cup of weak ale. Sitting on the low wall near the well, you watch the bustle of the manor go on around you. A pair of geese waddle purposefully toward the pond. Two young men roll a heavy barrel toward the brewhouse, their boots thudding in unison. The reeve strides past with a clipboard-like tablet of wax making notes as he moves from one task to another. After eating, you join a group heading to the edge of the woodland again. The storm has shaken down more branches than usual, and firewood is always welcome. You walk beneath the green canopy where sunlight slants through the leaves in shifting patches. The ground is soft and fragrant, littered with twigs and damp leaves. You gather an armful of dry wood, then pause to listen. Somewhere nearby, you hear the gentle bubbling of a small stream, its banks dotted with yellow buttercups. On the walk back, you pass the Manor's mill. The water wheel turns steadily, powered by the small stream diverted to feed it. Inside, the rhythmic grind of the millstones fills the air. You step in for a moment, watching the miller tend the great groaning machinery. He pours grain into the hopper, and the stones slowly crush it into coarse, golden meal. Dust hangs in the air, catching the light in a hazy halo around him. The steady sound of grinding seems to vibrate in your bones, slow, constant, unending. Later, you find yourself by the fish pond again, where the steward is checking the stock. He leans over the bank, watching the lazy movement of the carp, their broad backs glinting just beneath the surface. He dips a net and lifts a fish briefly for inspection, then releases it with a quiet splash. He notes something in his ledger, nods to you, and moves on. By late afternoon, the air has warmed enough that the damp smell of the morning is gone. Shadows lengthen across the green, and the sound of the chapel bell drifts across the manor once more, calling everyone toward evening. You carry your bundle of firewood home, the weight balanced on your shoulder, and feel the pleasant ache of a day well used. Inside the hall, the evening meal is a cheerful affair tonight. The rain has passed, the work has gone well, and the pottage is flavored with the leeks gathered earlier, their fresh, mild bite mixing with the soft sweetness of barley. Someone has brought in a small jug of cider from a neighboring village, and a few cups are passed around for tasting. Laughter rises here and there, the sound warm against the background hum of conversation. After supper, a few people linger by the hearth to tell short tales. One man speaks of a white stag seen deep in the forest, a sign of great fortune, he claims. A woman recalls a long-ago storm that washed out the mill race, leaving the manor without flour for a week. These stories, true or not, weave the fabric of shared memory, binding the people of the manor together just as much as the work they share. When you finally step outside, the sky is streaked with the last light of sunset, pale gold fading into soft blue. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and herbs from the kitchen garden. You walk slowly back to your cottage firewood, still balanced on your shoulder, and think about the quiet satisfaction that comes from these days' work, that matters because it belongs to everyone, and rest that feels earned in your bones. The next morning brings a pale, misty light, soft as wool. The village seems hushed, wrapped in a blanket of low fog that clings to the eaves and drifts across the green. You can hear the muffled sound of footsteps on damp earth as people begin to stir, but voices are low, almost cautious, as if not to wake the day too suddenly. You step outside, feeling the cool mist on your face. The air is damp and smells faintly of moss and wood smoke. Somewhere to your right, a cow lowing gently breaks the quiet. Beyond you can just make out the outline of the chapel through the shifting veil of fog, its small bell tower barely visible against the washed-out sky. Today's work is different. You've been called to help with the haymaking. It's a seasonal task tied closely to the weather. The grass must be cut, dried, and stored before the rains return. Too much moisture, and the hay will spoil in the barns, endangering the animals' winter feed. You and a group of others make your way to the meadow beyond the domain. The fog is beginning to lift now, revealing the tall, dew-heavy grasses bending under their own weight. Each blade glistens in the weak morning light. A few men carry scythes slung over their shoulders, their curved blades gleaming faintly even in the mist. Others, including you, have long wooden rakes and pitchforks. The cutting begins with a slow, swishing rhythm. The men with scythes move steadily in long arcs, each stroke slicing a neat swath through the grass. The scent of fresh-cut hay rises immediately sweet and green. You follow behind, with the rake gathering the cut grass into loose windrows, the dampness seeping cool through your boots. Birds dart in to snatch at disturbed insects, their quick darting movements a lively counterpoint to the slow, deliberate work of the humans. By mid-morning, the fog has burned away, and the sun warms your back as you work. The cut grass begins to dry in the light, its bright green fading to a softer gold. You pause to take a sip of water from a leather flask, watching the orderly lines of hay stretch across the meadow, like stripes in a great green-gold blanket. The reeve makes his rounds, checking the progress, his expression pleased. He exchanges a few words with the men, cutting, then glances toward you. "Keep it loose," he says, meaning the piles. "Tight heaps will trap moisture." You nod and go back to work, pulling your rake steadily through the grass, feeling the repetitive motion settle into your muscles. When the chapel bell rings for the midday meal, everyone gathers at the edge of the meadow. A few sit on the grass, others on overturned bundles of hay. The meal is simple bread cheese and a small onion, but it tastes better eaten in the open air. Someone passes around a skin of ale, the cool, faintly bitter drink refreshing after the work of the morning. After the short rest, you're back at it. The sun is higher now, the warmth deepening the smell of drying hay. You can feel the sweat on your brow, the dampness on your back. The cut grass rustles under your boots, its texture turning brittle as it dries. You spread and turn the windrows with your rake, letting the air flow through them so they dry evenly. It's slow, repetitive work, but in a way it's peaceful. There's a rhythm to it that lets your mind wander. You think about how many times this has been done before. Haymaking isn't new. It's the same now as it was in your grandparents' day, and will be in your grandchildren's. The tools might change shape a little, but the task is timeless. The animals need to eat in winter. The meadow must be cut. The hay must be stored. There's no skipping the step, no bargaining with the seasons. By late afternoon, the hay is ready to be gathered and carted to the barns. You and the others use pitchforks to lift great armfuls into waiting carts. The sweet scent of the hay is stronger now, and the dust from it tickles your nose. The oxen hitched to the carts stand patiently, their ears flicking at flies. Each cartload is taken to the barns where the hay is stacked high against the walls, forming golden mounds that will keep the cattle and oxen fed through the cold months. The last cart rolls in just as the shadows begin to lengthen. The reeve looks satisfied. The meadow is bare now, the cut grass gathered neatly away, the task complete for another year. Everyone is tired, arms and backs aching from the day's labor, but there's a shared sense of relief. This is one of the jobs you don't want to leave unfinished. In the hall that evening, the talk is livelier than usual. People exchange small jokes about who cut the straightest swaths or who dropped the most hay in the cart. The pottage tonight is thickened with beans, and someone's brought in a crock of pickled vegetables from last year's store. The tang cuts nicely against the earthiness of the stew. After the meal, a few sit near the hearth, nursing cups of cider. Others tend to quiet tasks, darning a sock, patching a tunic, binding a new broom from twigs. You watch the flames in the hearth leap and flicker their light, dancing over the rough-hewn beams above. The sound of quiet conversation is low, steady, like the murmur of a nearby stream. When you step outside to head home, the meadow smell still clings to your hands and clothes. The moon is a pale slice above the treetops, and the night air is cool and gentle. You walk slowly, feeling the pleasant ache in your muscles, and thinking about the hay resting safe in the barns, another piece of the manor's future secured. The next morning dawns with a crisp clarity, the kind that seems to sharpen every edge of the world. The air is cool but bright, the sun rising over the distant tree line in a soft gold that spills slowly across the manor lands. You wake to the sound of movement outside your shutter, the faint thump of boots, the creak of a cartwheel, and somewhere the high-pitched chatter of geese. Today's work takes you beyond the immediate fields and barns toward the Lord's woodland, an area carefully managed for its timber game and other resources. While the forest might seem wild to an outsider to the people of the manor, it's as much a part of the estate as the domain fields or the village green. Every tree, every fallen branch, every root has a place in the unspoken account book of the manor's economy. You join a small group gathered near the edge of the trees. A few men carry axes, their handles worn smooth from use. Others bring saws or long poles fitted with hooks for pulling down deadwood. Your own role today is to help with the underwood, cutting the careful harvesting of smaller trees and shrubs, which will provide firewood fencing material and sometimes even wattle for building. Stepping into the woodland is like entering another world. The light filters down in shifting patterns through the canopy, dappling the forest floor with gold and shadow. The air is cooler here, scented with damp earth and crushed leaves. Birdsong drifts from high above, mingled with the occasional drumming of a woodpecker. You can feel the quiet press around you, not silent, but alive in a different, slower way than the village. The work begins with marking which saplings to cut. Not everything can be taken. The woodland must be left able to renew itself. A more experienced villager shows you how to look for the right size, not too young, not too old, and how to cut cleanly so the stump will regrow. You set to work with your billhook, the blade biting into the wood with a satisfying chalk. Each sapling falls with a soft rustle, the leaves whispering briefly before settling into stillness. As you gather the cut branches into neat bundles, you notice the different scents rising from the wood. Hazel smells fresh and green. Oak has a richer, deeper aroma. The bundles are tied with strips of bark or lengths of old cord and stacked ready to be carried back. You pause to straighten your back, listening to the steady rhythm of axes and the occasional call from one worker to another. By mid-morning, the first cartload is ready. 2 men lead it back toward the manor, the cart piled high with bundles of underwood. The oxen move slowly under the weight, their hooves muffled by the soft earth. You return to your cutting, working in a kind of quiet trance. The repetitive motion, the forest sounds, and the cool shade make the hours pass gently. When the bell rings from the distant chapel, it's faint but clear enough to mark the midday break. Everyone gathers in a small clearing to eat bread, a few slices of cold meat if you're lucky, and water from a leather flask. You sit on a fallen log, feeling the texture of the bark under your hands, and watch the sunlight shift across the clearing. The smell of freshly cut wood clings to your clothes and hair. After the meal, the work changes. Some head deeper into the forest to check the charcoal burners' pits, shallow earth mounds, where wood is slowly burned to create charcoal for the smithy. You join a pair tasked with clearing a path blocked by a fallen tree. The trunk is thick, the bark rough under your palms as you help guide the saw back and forth. Each pull and push is a shared effort, the sound a low rasp that blends with the forest's background hum. By late afternoon, the last bundles are being loaded. The forest floor is scattered with pale stumps, each one marked for future regrowth. It's a reminder that the woodland isn't just a resource to be taken. It's a living part of the manor's survival, tended and renewed year after year. The walk back to the manor is slow, the carts heavy with the day's gathering. You pass the edge of the meadow, where yesterday's hay lies safe in the barns, and beyond that, the fish pond, its surface reflecting the lengthening shadows. The air is rich with evening scents, warm earth, distant wood smoke, and the faint tang of green wood freshly cut. Inside the hall, the evening meal is hearty. Tonight's pottage has been thickened with barley and flavored with a pinch of dried herbs from the kitchen garden. A few villagers roast small skewers of meat over the fire rabbit caught in a snare, or perhaps a pigeon from the dovecote. The talk is gentle, the kind that flows more easily after a day spent working side by side. After supper, you linger near the fire, feeling its warmth seep into your bones. The underwood you gathered today will feed many hearths, yours among them. Outside, the stars are beginning to prick the sky, and a thin crescent moon rises over the manor roof. When you step into the cool air, the smell of cut wood still clings to you, a reminder of the forest's quiet gift. You walk back to your cottage in the deepening dusk, your steps slow, unhurried. Behind you, the manor hall glows warmly, its windows like small beacons against the night. Ahead, your own door waits the promise of rest, as certain as the dawn that will come again tomorrow. The day begins with the softest kind of light, the kind that seems to seep into the world rather than fall on it. You wake to the faint smell of damp stone and old wood, the sound of a few early risers moving about outside. From beyond your shutter comes the low murmur of voices and the distant clop-clop of hooves heading toward the village edge. Somewhere nearby, a hen cackles, announcing the morning's first egg. Today, your task takes you to the Lord's dovecote. You've passed it many times, the round stone building, with its conical roof standing a little apart from the other outbuildings. It's an important part of the manor's resources. The pigeons provide meat for the table eggs for cooking, and their droppings prized as a rich fertilizer for the fields. Only the Lord and his household have the right to keep pigeons here, but the care of them often falls to chosen villagers. You approach along a narrow path lined with nettles and low hedges. The air is cool, but you can feel the promise of warmth in the pale sunlight. As you near the dovecote, you hear the soft flutter of wings and the cooing of dozens of birds within. The door is heavy, reinforced with iron bands, but it swings inward with a creak. Inside, the air is alive with movement, the whir of wings, the rustle of feathers, the layered chorus of gentle coos. The walls are lined with neatly built nesting boxes, each one home to a pair of plump pigeons. They blink at you with dark, round eyes, some shifting nervously on their perches, while others remain still unbothered by your presence. The floor is scattered with straw downy feathers and the fine dust of dried droppings. Sunlight slants in through a small opening near the roof, catching the soft drift of feathers as they float down. Your first job is to check the nests. You move slowly, lifting the edge of each box's small wooden door to peek inside. Some hold speckled eggs still warm from the bird's body. Others shelter small, down-covered chicks that peep faintly when disturbed. You make note of which nests are full and which are empty, careful not to startle the parents too much. Next, you scatter a measured amount of grain across the floor. The pigeons descend in a flurry wings, brushing your shoulders as they settle to feed. Their heads bob rhythmically as they peck at the grains, the sound of their beaks clicking faintly in the quiet. The air smells faintly musky, but underneath it, you can detect the sweetness of the grain itself. Once the birds are fed, you gather a small pail of droppings from the floor, a task less pleasant, but no less important. This will be mixed with straw and taken to the manor gardens where it will feed next season's vegetables and herbs. Every part of manor life loops back into itself. Nothing is wasted if it can be used. When the work is done, you close the dovecote door carefully and head toward the manor's gardens. Along the path, you pass the small orchard. The apple trees are in leaf now, their branches dotted with the first tiny fruits of the season. A few green-gold globes have already fallen to the ground, and you stoop to pick one up. It's firm and sour, not yet ready for eating, but still a promise of autumn. In the garden, a pair of women are already at work weeding between the rows of cabbages. You add your pail of fertilizer to the heap near the compost bin, exchanging a few quiet greetings. The air here is fragrant with herbs, rosemary, mint, and the tangy freshness of parsley. Bees hum lazily between the blossoms, their steady industry mirroring your own. By midday, the sun has burned away the last traces of morning coolness. You join the others in the hall for the meal today, a simple pottage of barley and leeks, flavored with a pinch of salt. The bread is fresh from the bakehouse, its crust crackling slightly as you tear it. A cup of weak ale helps wash it down, leaving a faint, yeasty tang on your tongue. After the meal, you're sent to the granary. This is one of the manor's most guarded places, a timber building raised off the ground on sturdy stone piers to keep out damp and rats. The door is thick, and the steward keeps the key. Inside, the air smells richly of grain, warm, dusty, and faintly sweet. Bins and sacks line the walls, each one carefully measured and accounted for. The steward stands with his tally stick, noting every measure that goes in or out. Your task is to help shift a newly threshed batch of barley into its bin. You work alongside another villager, lifting the sacks, feeling the heavy shift of the grain inside. The fine dust clings to your skin, and the sound of pouring grain is like a soft, endless rain. Every so often, the steward pauses to mark his stick, murmuring to himself. Grain is the lifeblood of the manor. Without it, no bread, no ale, no survival. When the work is done, you step back into the sunlight, blinking after the dimness inside. The afternoon has turned warm, and the air hums with insects. You make your way past the fish pond, where a boy is tossing crumbs to the carp. The fish rise lazily, mouths gaping in slow, deliberate gulps. The boy grins at you, tossing another handful. As evening approaches, you carry your tools back to your cottage. The smell of supper drifts from the hall tonight. The pottage carries the scent of fresh herbs from the garden. You eat slowly, savoring the mild sweetness of the leeks, the chew of the coarse bread, and the comfort of familiar flavors. After the meal, you sit by the fire, mending a tear in your tunic with a bone needle and coarse thread. Around you, the hall hums with quiet conversation. A few people sing softly old tunes whose words are half remembered. The fire crackles, the rushes on the floor rustle as feet pass over them, and the day settles gently toward its close. When you finally step out into the cool night, the dovecote is a dark, silent silhouette against the starlit sky. Somewhere inside, the pigeons sleep in their neat rows of boxes, the soft rustle of feathers barely audible in the stillness. You walk home slowly, carrying the day's small labors in your bones, and the manor seems to breathe with you steady, quiet, and unhurried. Morning comes with a pale wash of gold across the fields. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of dew-wet grass and a faint sweetness from the hedgerows. You rise slowly, stretching the stiffness from your limbs, and listen for a moment to the quiet rustle of life around the village. The creak of a door, the soft chatter of women fetching water, the distant bark of a dog out on the green. Today, the steward has called for a maintenance day on the manor's buildings. The structures here, barns, sheds, workshops, even the manor hall, are all built of timber wattle and daub with thatched roofs that need constant care. Left untended, a loose thatch or a weakened beam can bring ruin in a single season of wind and rain. You begin at the bakehouse. The building is low and sturdy, its thick walls holding in the heat from the great bread oven. Inside, the air is warm and smells faintly of ash and old bread. The baker flour, streaking his tunic and arms, is busy preparing the day's loaves. You help by patching a small crack in the daub wall, mixing clay straw and a bit of animal hair into a sticky paste that you press carefully into the gap. The cool, damp mixture clings to your fingers before you smooth it flat. Outside, the thatcher has already begun work on the bakehouse roof. He moves with a steady, practiced rhythm, sliding bundles of straw into place and securing them with twisted hazel rods. You pass him a bundle when he calls down, feeling the dry straw rasp against your palms. Each bundle smells faintly of last summer's sun, a trapped memory of warmth. From the bakehouse, you move to the brewery. It's smaller, but just as important. Here, barrels of ale in various stages of brewing line the walls, their wooden hoops darkened with age. A cooper is at work, tightening the hoops on one cask, tapping gently with a mallet until the fit is snug. You help haul a finished barrel to the cool shade of the storage room, feeling its weight pull at your arms. By mid-morning, the sun is higher, and you're sent to the smithy to assist with repairs to the large iron hinges on the manor's main gates. The blacksmith's forge glows bright, the coals shifting with a hiss when he works the bellows. You hand him tools as he works the heat from the forge pressing against your skin. The smell of hot iron fills the air, sharp and metallic, mingling with the scent of smoke. When he plunges a glowing hinge into the water trough, it hisses violently, sending up a cloud of steam that dampens your face. The gates themselves are solid oak banded with iron. You help hold one steady, while the blacksmith and his apprentice fit the new hinge, the weight heavy against your shoulder. The sound of hammer on metal rings through the courtyard, echoing off the walls of the manor hall. The midday meal is taken outside on the green bread still warm from the bakehouse, a wedge of cheese and a few pickled vegetables from the store. People sit in loose groups, talking in low voices, or simply enjoying the sunlight. You share a bench with a carpenter, his hands still smelling faintly of fresh-cut wood, and listen to him talk about the repairs planned for the mill wheel before winter comes. After the break, you're sent with a small crew to the fish pond embankment. The rains earlier in the season have washed away some of the bank, and it needs shoring up before it gives way. You help dig and pack earth into the worn spots, stamping it down with the flat of your shovel. The smell of wet mud is strong, clinging to your boots, but the work is satisfying. Each shovelful brings the bank closer to being safe again. From there, you make your way to the chapel. Its whitewashed walls are streaked with green where damp has settled in. You climb a small ladder to scrape away moss from the stone trim flakes tumbling down into the grass below. The chapel bell hangs above you, silent now, but you can imagine its steady toll calling people to prayer or marking the day's hours. By late afternoon, you pass through the manor garden, where the kitchen servants are trimming herbs for the evening meal. The scent of rosemary and thyme drifts on the air. You carry a bundle of repaired tools to the shed hose with new handles, a scythe blade freshly sharpened, and set them neatly in place. There's a quiet pride in knowing these tools will last another season. The work winds down as the light begins to soften. People drift toward the hall faces, flushed from sun and labor. Inside the evening meal waits pottage thickened with beans and flavored with a hint of garlic from the garden bread, from the newly mended bakehouse, and a small serving of ale. The air is warm, filled with the mingled scents of food smoke, and the faint tang of sweat from the day's efforts. After supper, the hall is filled with the soft murmur of voices. A few play dice on an upturned stool. Others mend worn clothing or carve small wooden tools by the firelight. The steward sits at his table quill, scratching over parchment as he notes the day's work and plans tomorrow's. When you step outside, the air is cooling quickly. The roofs glow faintly in the last light, the repaired thatch blending neatly with the old. The manor feels solid, cared for, the kind of place that with constant tending will stand for generations. You walk home along the quiet lane, the faint creak of the repaired gates following you into the evening. The day begins with a sky washed pale blue, the kind that promises fair weather from dawn to dusk. A faint breeze stirs the thatch on your cottage roof, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, fresh-turned soil, and the faint sweetness of drying herbs from the manor garden. You dress quickly, pulling on your well-worn boots, and step into the morning light just as the chapel bell calls the village to life. Today is market day, one of the most anticipated days in the manor's rhythm. It isn't a grand city market with endless stalls and shouting merchants, but rather a gathering of locals and a handful of traveling traders who make the slow circuit between neighboring manors and small towns. These days bring a hum of energy to the village that you can feel even before you see the market itself. The green, usually quiet except for grazing geese or children playing, is already alive with motion. Villagers are setting out their goods, baskets of eggs, bundles of onions, skeins of homespun yarn, and the occasional carved wooden spoon or small iron tool. You bring with you a small offering from your own work, a bundle of firewood neatly tied, and a few surplus leeks from the garden. The air hums with conversation, the shuffle of feet on grass, and the occasional bleat of a goat or squawk of a chicken protesting its pen. At the far end of the green, a traveling cloth merchant has set up a display of dyed wool, soft reds, deep blues, and pale, creamy whites that gleam in the sunlight. His cloth is expensive, but people gather to touch it, running calloused fingers over the fine weave. A peddler has spread his goods on a blanket, pins, ribbons, a small looking glass, no bigger than your palm, and a handful of dried figs wrapped carefully in cloth. The figs are a rare treat here, and a small crowd lingers to smell them. Nearby, a potter stacks earthenware bowls in neat piles, their reddish clay still smelling faintly of the kiln. You trade your leeks for a small wedge of cheese from a neighbor, and your bundle of firewood for a handful of nails from the traveling ironmonger. The nails will be useful for mending the loose hinge on your cottage door. Market day isn't only about buying and selling, it's about reinforcing the web of exchange and mutual support that keeps the manor thriving. By mid-morning, the market is in full swing. Children dart between stalls, giggling, clutching little treasures given or traded to them. A traveling storyteller stands near the well, drawing a small crowd with a tale of a distant battle. His voice rises and falls, weaving images of banners, horses, and valor, though you suspect the story has grown in the telling. Coins drop into his wooden bowl as the crowd disperses. From one of the cottages comes the smell of fresh honey cakes. The baker's wife has made them for today's market, and a short line forms to buy them. You manage to trade a small length of twine and one of your nails for a single cake, sweet, dense, and fragrant with cinnamon, another rare treat likely brought in by a passing merchant. The morning slips by in easy conversation and small exchanges. You see faces from nearby hamlets, people you know only by sight, but who greet you warmly nonetheless. Market day is also a chance to hear news the next village over has had a good flax harvest. A new priest is coming to a nearby parish. A band of traveling masons is seeking work before winter. As the sun nears its highest point, the market begins to slow. Traders pack their goods, tying them into bundles to be loaded onto carts or slung over shoulders. Villagers linger to say their last words, to make small promises. "I'll bring you more onions next week," or "Tell your wife my thanks for the butter." The midday meal is taken on the green, sitting in small groups. You share your honey cake with a neighbor, washing it down with a sip of ale from a shared jug. The air is warm now, the breeze gentle. Insects drift lazily in the sunlight, and somewhere a lark sings high above the open fields. After the meal, the green empties quickly. People return to their daily work, the market's lively hum replaced by the steadier rhythm of ordinary afternoon tasks. You head toward the manor storehouse to help with tallying the goods received from the market. Small sacks of grain, a few pots, and bundles of flax to be spun into linen. The steward stands with his wax tablet, scratching marks with his stylus as each item is carried in. Later, you help carry a heavy barrel of ale from the brewery to the hall, rolling it slowly over the packed earth courtyard. The sound of it turning a deep, steady thump echoes faintly off the hall's timbered walls. Inside, servants are laying out bread and cheese for the evening meal, the air already scented faintly with cooking herbs. As the afternoon fades toward evening, you walk past the now empty green. Only a few stray feathers and bits of straw remain to hint at the bustle of the morning. The village feels quieter, but not emptily so, more like it has taken a deep breath after the day's gathering. In the hall, supper is a simple pottage enriched with carrots from the garden, the bread still warm from the oven. Conversation is easy, a mix of local gossip and retellings of the storyteller's tale for those who missed it. Someone hums a tune softly by the fire, and a few others join in until the low song fills the background like a lullaby. When you step outside, the moon is just rising over the treetops. You walk home slowly, carrying the day's small trades in your satchel, the faint taste of honey still lingering. The green is empty now, silvered by moonlight, and the manor rests under the same quiet sky it has known for centuries. The morning begins with the muffled clink of harness buckles and the low murmur of voices outside. You rise, dress, and step into the cool air to see a pair of oxen being readied in the lane, their broad, patient faces turned toward the fields. Today is plowing day again, and the domain's heavy soil will demand the full strength of the Manor's teams. The sun is still low as you walk out toward the fields. The grass along the path sparkles with dew soaking the leather of your boots. Ahead, the plows are already in place, long wooden frames with iron-tipped blades that will slice deep into the earth. The air smells faintly metallic from the iron mingled with the sweeter scent of the damp soil waiting to be turned. You're assigned to walk behind one of the teams guiding the plow as the oxen move forward in their slow, steady gait. The wooden handles are smooth under your palms, but bite into your skin after the first few furrows. You lean your weight into them, helping keep the blade steady as it cuts. Each pass leaves behind a dark, furrowed ribbon of soil, moist and rich, ready for seed. The work is relentless, but strangely hypnotic step guide turn at the end of the strip, step again. Your mind drifts as the oxen breathe heavily ahead of you, their flanks rising and falling in a steady rhythm. A rook circles overhead, its shadow sliding across the fresh-turned earth. Somewhere nearby, a man sings softly under his breath, the tune carrying faintly over the open field. By mid-morning, the sun is warm enough that you push back your hood. The reeve walks the edges of the field, his staff in hand, making sure each team keeps to its allotted section. He stops now and then to check the depth of the furrows, nodding when they meet his measure. This isn't just about getting the job done. It's about doing it well enough to ensure a good harvest. When the chapel bell calls for the midday break, you gather with the others near the edge of the field. Bread, a slice of cheese, and a few dried apples make up your meal, washed down with water from a shared jug. Sitting on the grass, you stretch your legs and watch the oxen graze their tails, flicking lazily at flies. The scent of the earth is all around you, rich and loamy, the promise of growth still hidden beneath its surface. After the rest, you return to the plow. The sun is higher now, the soil drying just enough to crumble a little under the blade. You work steadily, sweat dampening your tunic, the ache in your arms and shoulders growing deeper with each pass. Still, there's a quiet satisfaction in seeing the field transformed strip by strip, a visible measure of the day's labor. By late afternoon, the last furrow is cut. The teams are led back toward the barns, the plow blades muddy and dulled from the day's work. You scrape the worst of the soil away with a flat stick before hanging the plow in the shed, ready to be sharpened tomorrow. The oxen are unharnessed, their yokes lifted carefully from their necks, and they are led into their stalls where fresh hay waits. You linger for a moment in the barn. The air is warm from the animal's breath, and the slow sound of chewing fills the space. Dust motes dance in the shafts of light streaming through the gaps in the boards. The smell here is strong but familiar hay leather and the faint sharpness of dung. In the evening, the hall is filled with the low murmur of tired voices. Supper is barley pottage with a sprinkling of peas, and the bread is dark, made from a mix of rye and barley flour. People eat quietly, the fatigue of the day settling into their bones. The steward moves between the tables, noting who worked where, and marking the tally on a small wax tablet. After the meal, a few men sit near the fire to mend harness straps, the leather creaking softly under their hands. Others simply lean back on the benches, eyes half closed, content to let the fire's warmth seep into them. The smell of smoke and warm bread lingers in the air, mingling with the faint tang of sweat and soil. When you step outside, the night is clear. The stars feel close sharp against the dark sky, and the air is cool enough to make you draw your cloak tighter. You walk slowly to your cottage, each step heavy but sure, carrying the day's work with you like a quiet weight. Tomorrow will bring another set of tasks, perhaps lighter, perhaps heavier, but tonight, the plowed fields rest under starlight, ready to cradle the seeds that will feed the manor through the coming year. The day begins softer than most, with a gray light that seems to blur the edges of everything. The air feels cool and damp, a faint mist curling just above the grass. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the creak of a cartwheel and the muffled voices of two men speaking low as they pass along the lane. You draw your cloak a little tighter and step outside. Today's work draws you to the mill, that steady humming heart of the manor's food supply. The mill stands beside the stream, its great wooden wheel turning slowly, dipping into the flowing water and lifting droplets that catch the light before falling back. The steady groan of timber and the splash of water make a kind of music that's been part of this place for longer than anyone can remember. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of ground grain, warm, dusty, almost sweet. The sound of the stones grinding together is a deep, constant rumble like the purr of some giant animal. The miller, his hands dusted white, moves with quiet efficiency between the hopper and the sacks waiting to be filled. You join him, lifting a sack of barley onto the low bench and helping guide it into the hopper. The grain pours steadily, a dry hiss beneath the rumble of the stones. You watch as the flour emerges below coarse, pale gold, falling into the waiting bin in a soft, endless stream. The miller takes a small handful, rubs it between his fingers, and nods. "Good enough for bread," he says, though a finer grind would be saved for the Lord's table. You help tie off the filled sacks, knotting the coarse hemp rope tight so the grain won't spill. Then you carry them to the storage corner, stacking them neatly with others already ground. The work is steady, repetitive, and oddly calming. Each movement has been done 1,000 times before each sack, a small part of the manor's survival. By mid-morning, the light has brightened, and the mist has lifted from the meadows. You step outside for a moment to breathe the fresher air. The stream chuckles softly beside you, its banks thick with reeds. Across the water, a heron stands motionless, waiting for the right moment to strike at a fish. The stillness around it is broken only by the steady turning of the mill wheel. Back inside, you sweep the flour dust from the floor. It clings to your boots, to your tunic, even to your hair. The miller chuckles, telling you it's the mark of honest work. Though he warns to keep it away from open flame, flour can catch fire faster than you'd think. You nod, tucking the tip away with the quiet respect given to someone who has seen such things happen. The chapel bell calls for the midday meal. You and the miller walk back toward the hall, your boots leaving pale prints of flour on the path. The meal is simple bread, of course, made from the very grain you've been grinding, with a slice of salted fish and a cup of ale. The bread is coarse and chewy, the crust thick, but it fills you in a way no finer loaf could. After the meal, you return to the mill this time to work on cleaning the millstones. It's careful, deliberate work, lifting the upper stone with a wooden lever, brushing away the fine dust and the tiny bits of grain that have lodged in the grooves. The miller shows you how to inspect the furrows, making sure they're sharp enough to cut, but not so deep that they tear. You run your fingers over the cool stone, feeling the faint ridges beneath your touch. Once the stones are set back in place, you help bring in more sacks of grain from the storehouse. The ox-drawn cart creaks under the load, the smell of the grain warm in the sun. You tip each sack into the hopper, listening to the soft rush of kernels pouring inside. The mill hums again, steady as a heartbeat. By late afternoon, the sacks of flour are ready to be delivered to the bakehouse. You shoulder one yourself, feeling the weight press into you, and carry it along the lane. At the bakehouse, the baker's wife greets you with a smile, brushing flour from her hands as she takes the sack. The scent of baking bread drifts into the air, rich and comforting, promising the evening's meal. Back at the mill, the wheel still turns as it will tomorrow and the day after. The steady labor here feels different from the fleeting tasks of the fields. The mill is constant, its work unending, a quiet foundation beneath the life of the manor. As evening comes, you walk home with a light dusting of flour still clinging to your sleeves. Supper in the hall is warm bread from the bakehouse pottage, thick with cabbage and carrots, and the hum of quiet conversation. The day's rhythm has been slow but steady, each task folding into the next, without rush or waste. When you step outside after the meal, the air is cool and faintly sweet. The stream glimmers in the moonlight, the mill wheel a slow shadow against the water. Somewhere the heron has taken flight, but the wheel keeps turning, as patient and certain as the manor itself. The morning greets you with a muted sky, the light diffused through a veil of high clouds. The air is neither cold nor warm, just still with a softness that makes sounds travel farther than usual. You hear the rhythmic clack of a loom from somewhere in the village, the slow thud of a mallet at the carpenter's shed, and the faint clanging from the smithy. Today your work takes you to the fulling mill, or in this manor's case, the small workshop where wool cloth is finished by hand. It's a quieter place than the grain mill, but no less important. The wool from the manor's sheep, sheared in spring and spun into yarn, must be thickened and cleaned before it becomes the sturdy cloth that will clothe the villagers through winter. You step inside the workshop, greeted by the warm, lanolin-rich scent of wool. Bales of unwashed fleece are stacked in one corner, their creamy curls tinged with bits of straw and burrs. Against the far wall stands a great wooden trough filled with water, and a mixture of fuller's earth, a pale clay that will draw out oils and dirt. Today you'll help with treading the cloth, a job that is exactly what it sounds like. The cloth has already been loosely woven on the village loom. Now it's your task to soak and press it over and over until the fibers tighten and thicken. You roll up your trousers, step into the trough, and begin the slow, steady rhythm of treading. The water is warm at first, though it quickly cools against your shins. The cloth underfoot has a strange softness, springy but resistant. Around you, others work in their own sections of cloth, stamping in a pattern that almost becomes music, a muffled beat beneath the murmur of voices. Every so often, someone hauls a finished length from the trough and drapes it over a wooden beam to dry. The wet wool steams faintly in the cool air, its scent rising around you. By mid-morning, your legs ache from the constant motion. You pause to lean on the edge of the trough, watching a weaver across the room as she repairs a break in the loom's warp threads. Her hands move quickly, tying the fine strands with the precision of long practice. Beside her, a basket of dyed yarn waits deep brown, pale cream and a muted green from nettle dye. The chapel bell calls for the midday meal. You step out of the trough, water streaming from your legs, and pull on your boots again. The workshop is left quiet, the damp wool resting in its troughs. At the hall, the meal is a slice of coarse bread, a ladle of thick bean pottage, and a mug of small ale. You sit near the hearth to warm your legs, the heat working its way into your muscles. Conversation is light, a joke about someone falling into the trough years ago, a bit of gossip about a shepherd courting a weaver. After the meal, you return to the workshop for the drying and stretching. The cloth is hung on tall frames pegged at the edges to keep it from shrinking too much as it dries. You help stretch a heavy length between two beams, pulling until the weave is taut. Your fingers catch on the rough wool, leaving them faintly sore. The afternoon passes in the quiet rhythm of this work. Some pieces are brushed with teasel heads, spiny seed heads that lift the nap of the fabric, while others are folded and stacked for storage. The finished cloth is dense and warm, ready to be cut into tunics, cloaks, or blankets. By late afternoon, the workshop smells strongly of damp wool and fuller's earth. Your boots are heavy from the day's soaking your legs, pleasantly tired. The last cloth of the day is pegged to dry, its pale surface glowing softly in the fading light. Evening brings a change of pace. You return to your cottage briefly to change into dry hose before heading to the hall. Supper is simple barley pottage again, but brightened tonight with a handful of fresh parsley from the garden. The bread is dark, its crust crisp from the bakehouse oven. After the meal, the hall is livelier than usual. Someone has brought a small drum, and a few people begin a slow, steady beat. Others hum along, weaving snatches of old songs between the rhythm. You sit back on the bench, letting the sound blend with the lingering smell of smoke and wool that clings to you. When you finally step outside, the air is cool and clean. The high clouds have begun to break, and a few bright stars prick through the fading gray. From the workshop, the drying frames stand like tall, silent sentinels, each holding its gift of warmth for the coming season. You walk home with the soft thump of the drum still echoing faintly in your ears, the day's work settling into you like the weight of a warm blanket. Dawn comes with a pale stripe of gold along the horizon and a faint chill in the air that whispers of the changing season. When you step outside, you see your breath drift upward in little clouds. The grass underfoot is damp with dew sparkling faintly in the early light. Somewhere near the green, a cow lows, answered by another from across the lane. Today your place is in the Lord's garden. Not the small kitchen plots that most villagers keep, but the manor's own enclosed space where vegetables, herbs, and a few rare fruits grow under careful watch. The garden is walled with timber and hedge, both to keep out grazing animals and to mark its special status. Within the beds are laid out in neat rows bordered by low planks to keep the soil from spilling into the pathways. You meet the gardener near the tool shed, a quiet man with soil permanently embedded in the creases of his hands. He hands you a wooden rake and a small hand hoe, nodding toward a bed of carrots that needs clearing of weeds. The soil is cool and crumbly under your fingers as you work the small green fronds of carrot tops swaying gently in the breeze. Every so often you pull one up to check its size. Most are still small, needing a little more time in the ground. The air here is fragrant, not just with the earthy smell of turned soil, but with the mingled scents of rosemary, thyme, and sage from the herb beds. Near the garden's edge, a row of leeks stands tall, their white stalks banded with soil. In another corner, beans climb up their poles, their green pods just beginning to plump. By mid-morning, the sun is warm on your back. You join the gardener in thinning the cabbage patch, removing the smaller plants, so the stronger ones have room to grow. The large leaves are cool and waxy under your hands, their scent faintly peppery. You set the thinnings aside. Nothing here goes to waste. They'll be used in the evening pottage. The chapel bell calls for the midday meal, and you carry a small bundle of herbs with you to the hall, a gift for the cook. Today's bread is warm from the oven, the crust crackling as you tear it. The pottage is flavored with leeks and a pinch of the very parsley you saw growing earlier in the week. There's a shared pleasure in tasting the garden's work, so soon after tending it. After the meal, you return to the garden for watering. There's no pump here, only the well, and a long chain of hands passing buckets. You join the line, lifting each heavy pail and pouring it carefully between the rows. The water darkens the soil, releasing a richer scent of earth. Bees hum lazily among the flowering herbs, and a pair of sparrows flit down to snatch at seeds between your feet. Once the beds are watered, you help gather windfall apples from the small orchard beside the garden. Most are bruised from the fall, but they'll still be good for cooking. The skins are cool and smooth, and when you press one to your nose, the scent is sharp and sweet all at once. You pile them into a woven basket, the red and green skins bright against the brown of the wicker. The gardener shows you how to stake a young pear tree that's leaning after last week's winds. Together, you drive a stout post into the ground and bind the trunk gently but firmly. He says the pears will not bear well for years yet, but when they do, the fruit will be worth the wait. Patience is a kind of skill here learned in seasons rather than hours. As the day tilts toward evening, you gather the tools and return them to the shed. The garden looks orderly now, its beds straight and well tended, the air richer for the day's work. You carry a few windfall apples home the basket, bumping gently against your hip. In the hall, the evening meal carries the garden into the pottage, cabbage, thinnings, leeks, and a handful of beans that were ready for picking. The bread is still warm, and there's even a dish of stewed apples for the high table, their scent carrying down to where you sit. After supper, the hall is calm. The gardener sits near the fire, quietly whittling the handle for a new trowel. A few others mend clothes, the sound of thread pulling through cloth soft against the background crackle of the hearth. When you step outside, the air is cool again. The garden beyond the hedge is dark now, but you can still picture its neat rows under the moonlight. You walk slowly home, the faint scent of rosemary still clinging to your hands, and think about how the Manor's rhythm is written as much in the slow growth of plants as in the steady work of its people. The morning breaks cool and bright, the kind of day when every sound seems clear and near. You wake to the low murmur of voices drifting from the lane, the scrape of a wooden bucket on the well's stone lip, and the gentle scuff of boots on packed earth. A shaft of sunlight slips through a crack in your shutter, catching on the motes of dust that turn lazily in the still air. Today is laundry day, one of the Manor's quieter, but no less essential labors. You gather your worn tunic linen undershirt and a small bundle of household cloths, tying them neatly before heading toward the wash area near the stream. The water here runs clear and cool, shaded by leaning willows. A line of women and a few older children are already there, their baskets at their feet, sleeves rolled high. You find a spot along the bank and kneel on the smooth, damp stones. The water bites cold against your hands as you soak the first tunic. A woman beside you hums a tune as she works her rhythm. Steady soak rub with lye soap rinse, beat gently against a flat stone, rinse again. The scent of the soap rises in the morning air, sharp and clean, undercut by the fresher smell of the stream. The work is simple, but absorbing. The cloth darkens in the water, grows heavy, then lightens again as the dirt washes away. You wring it out your hands, reddening from the cold, and lay it on a wicker basket to carry to the drying green. Others do the same, chatting softly between the splash of water and the snap of wet cloth being shaken out. By mid-morning, the drying green is dotted with linen fluttering in the breeze, tunics, aprons, sheets all shifting gently, like sails on a quiet sea. The sun warms your face as you spread your own cloths, neatly smoothing out wrinkles with the flat of your palm. When the chapel bell calls for the midday meal, you walk to the hall with the scent of clean linen clinging to you. The pottage today is thick with beans and carrots, the bread still warm from the bakehouse. You eat at an easy pace, your hands wrapped around the wooden bowl for warmth. The afternoon brings the second part of the work, mending. In the hall's softer light, you sit with a small sewing kit, a bone needle, coarse linen thread, and the clothes you've just washed. A frayed cuff is stitched tight again. A small tear in your tunic's seam is drawn closed with neat, sturdy stitches. Others work beside you, some patching, some darning, the air filled with the gentle pull and tug sound of thread through fabric. By late afternoon, the laundry on the green is dry. You fold each piece carefully, stacking it in your basket. The linen is crisp, the scent of the outdoors now woven into its fibers. There's quiet satisfaction in knowing these simple things, clean clothes, mended seams, will make the days ahead more comfortable. As the sun lowers, you carry your bundle home. The lane is calm, touched with golden light. A few chickens scratch in the dust, their feathers gleaming. In the distance, smoke begins to rise from chimneys, curling into the cooling air. Supper is simple bread, pottage, and a slice of cheese traded from a neighbor. Afterward, the hall is peaceful. A man carves a wooden spoon near the hearth. A woman hums softly as she braids a length of cord. The air is warm, the light dim, the day's work gently settling into the bones of everyone here. When you step outside at last, the moon is rising over the fields, silvering the rooftops. The sound of the stream drifts on the still air, carrying with it the quiet memory of the morning's work. You walk home slowly, the cool linen under your arm, a small but certain sign of the manor's unending cycle of care. The day on the manor has ended, but its quiet rhythm still lingers in the air. The fires in the hall burn low, their glow spilling softly across the rush-strewn floor. Outside the lane lies empty, save for the pale shimmer of moonlight on damp cobbles. A faint breeze moves through the trees, stirring the leaves in a slow, unhurried whisper. Somewhere far off, an owl calls its voice low and steady, like the final note of a lullaby. You've washed, mended, and folded the small pieces of your life today. The air in your cottage holds the faint scent of clean linen and wood smoke, the comforting smells of a place that shelters and belongs to you. Your tools are put away, the hearth banked for the night, and the quiet has a weight to it now, not heavy but gentle, the way a woolen blanket rests across your shoulders. The manor sleeps, but it is never truly still. The oxen shift in their stalls. The coals in the bakehouse oven settle with a soft sigh. Somewhere a guard on the gate shifts his weight, listening to the night. And above it all, the stars shine cold and bright, looking down on a pattern of life that has gone on here for centuries, without hurry, without pause. You lie down the straw mattress settling under your weight. The wool blanket is warm against the lingering coolness of your skin. Your eyes close and the sounds of the day fade into memory, The splash of the stream on laundry day, the murmur of voices at the hall table, the rustle of wind in the garden's herbs. These moments drift together, soft as mist, carrying you toward sleep. Tomorrow will bring the same familiar rhythm, and when it does, you'll step into it as naturally as breathing. For now, let the quiet hold you.